We live in a world ruled by tyranny, where knowledge is suppressed and ignorance is glorified. A world where propaganda and misinformation travel the airways at the speed of lies. But in the midst of the violence and chaos, a great awakening is taking place. And as the media empires continue to collapse, a new network is forming. A network of truth, a network of courage, a network of awareness. Peace and greetings. You are now tuned into the Network of Awareness podcast radio station, where we examine current events, politics, health, finance, and topics of cultural relevance in America and throughout the world, while bringing you insightful interviews with guests that will both educate and inspire you. And now, your host of the Network of Awareness podcast radio station, Aura the Informationalist.
My aura is a network full of awareness and gifts like Aura the Informationalist.
The content of this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, financial, or other professional advice. The views expressed in this podcast are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or positions of the Network of Awareness's producers, subsidiaries, entities, or any other associated parties.
Peace and greetings, people. This is Aura the Informationalist, your host of the Network of Awareness. And you're now tuned into this pre-recorded episode that we'll be broadcasting live. And I got my guest back, John Kirwin. And we're going to bring him back on the show to discuss basically this long legacy of lies. So this is a Legacy of Lies series. And when I had brought John on, we talked a little bit about his book, The Conspiracy Theorist Survival Guide, a guidebook for persecuted truthers. And in this book, which we will bring him back to discuss detailed information about it once I get to read the book. But the reason why I wanted him to come on to today's show for The Legacy of Lies is because this is a series that I'm very passionate about. And there's so much to discuss when it comes to the legacy of lies. And today's episode is titled Unveiling the Legacy of Lies, Navigating a Manipulated Society. In a world brimming with uncertainties, it is easy to feel overwhelmed by the constant barrage of advertisements that play on our deepest anxieties and insecurities. And as you join us on this eye-opening podcast episode, as we delve into the intricate web of lies that has woven itself into the fabric of human history, creating a legacy that continues to shape our modern-day society present day. Our reality is often sugar-coated and engineered by a powerful legacy of lies. Vital information, essential for making informed, conscious decisions, is deliberately kept out of reach. Secrets and confusion abound in our current culture, leading us to question the authenticity of the world around us. As we explore the vast expanse of misinformation saturating the internet and television, and it becomes clear how these lies have diverted people from their true selves. The narratives fed by us by commercial media, doctrines, and romper room politics shape our opinions and our lifestyles, perpetuating a tainted status quo that compromises our individual and collective well-being. The consequences are profound, and humanity's perceptions are altered, and our society is socially compromised in myriad of ways. The taught and learned behaviors ingrained in us since birth limit our awareness, leaving us susceptible to manipulation. So join us as we unravel with John Kirwin the layers of deception and strive for a deeper understanding of the legacy of lies that surround us all. Through thoughtful conversation and insightful analysis, John and I are going to aim to empower the listeners to reclaim their true selves, free from the constraints of a manipulated society. It's time to break free from the chains of misinformation and rediscover the path to genuine awareness, people. So let's go. Let's get this show started, shall we?
Nice.
Welcome to the show, John. How you doing?
I'm really good. Super great intro. Loved it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm taking a lot more time to write, and I'm putting blogs together, something I've been wanting to do for a while, be a blogger. So I'm creating these blogs based on episodes I'm doing, putting them in literary form, obviously in a blog on the website. So sometimes people say, you know what, I like your shows, but sometimes I'd like to just read. So I've been putting in the transcripts now. I figured out how to do that because I had some major issues with that. But also just telling people, hey, go to the blog, advertising that on social media. By the way, I'm going to be advertising the clips from our last show today on social media. So I'll send you everything I have.
All right.
And welcome to the show. I mean, we got a lot to discuss about this legacy of lies and this sugar-coated, manipulated society that we live in.
Indeed. Is this audio only, or are we on camera
Both.
somewhere? It's both.
So,
that's what I thought. Okay.
So this will always be on camera when I do shows with you, unless we're talking about very, very, very controversial things like the okey pokey.
Yes, indeed.
The people, the synthetic people and all that. But if we're not, this will always be on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube live.
Cool.
I put it as a live stream, and then it's on every podcasting platform imaginable. Everyone. So with that being said, John, you and I were talking offline about this, and I wanted to start this off because you brought out some interesting things about how people limit themselves to certain understandings based on somebody else's understanding, especially when it comes to books and doctrines, and they close themselves off from really spiritually becoming awakened to things, to where, in my experiences, I've seen and it doesn't mean it's it doesn't mean that, and I want to make sure I make this very clear. It doesn't mean that the people that are doing this are bad people, because a lot of these people are in our families. A lot of these people are good people for the most part. Like they're not going around sacrificing babies or anything like that.
Right.
You know what I mean? But they're very closed off. And a lot of that, from my perception, has come from pride, being closed off from the truth. And a lot of times the truth, I've mentioned this to you before, can be present right in front of somebody's face, but because they're so closed off based on a conditioned perception and way of seeing life, they immediately dismiss things. And sometimes they'll dismiss things as, oh, that's malarkey, or that's witchcraft, or that's your own understanding, or that's philosophy, and all these other things. And let's just be honest, John, we all know that when it comes to a lot of these doctrines, there were books that were taken and selected to put these books together. So you're not getting the whole totality of the meaning of spirituality by the ancestors. You're getting bits and pieces based on what was going on in those times. We can go back to the Council of Carthage, the Council of Nicaea, and many other time frames or time periods where things were manipulated to fit the status quo so that there can be control. just like the Roman Catholic Church does in the Vatican to a present day. They run on their own, they're their own country and their own system. I mean, they even tax their people unfairly over there. So this stuff goes on. And I want to talk about this with you because especially when it comes to the Bible, I've seen it so many times where people don't even understand that a lot of the scriptures, especially the epistles, those are philosophies. Those are understandings based on other men's perceptions of their reality and their relationship with what they believe to be as God. So mostly everything, if not everything, is a philosophy and a perception of something coming from man. All right. Because, you know, I think some people believe that God writes these lyrics or writes these scriptures, but in actuality, it's coming from men, and which is fine. The problem is that from my perception, I see how people don't think for themselves. It's something you brought about. There's no thought coming from from themselves. Like everything is going to be brought out based on somebody else's understanding or based on a book, you know, because if you were to ask me a question and I, let's say, bring out a book that I'm very well versed in, I'm say, well, hey, this book says this book says that. Is it really coming from you? Is it like you said the other day? Is that your belief or is that somebody else's belief? Is that coming from somewhere else? But you mentioned something else about people who only stick to one book and one doctrine. And we see this throughout Judaism, Christianity, and Islam specifically. So go ahead, sir. You can start it off from there. I know I said a bunch, but you know, I want you to talk about that because you brought up some great points earlier.
Clarify the question. You want me to talk about what exactly?
So
you covered a lot.
Yeah. So let's start off with this. Based on your experiences, the people that close themselves off to looking at a book and basing all of their information, knowledge, and understanding off that one book. And what that's called
specifically?
Yeah, the Bible.
All right. And just to clarify, I'm coming from a biblical worldview and a ministry background. So I was a full-time ministry for about 11 years in a big church in New York, Dave Wilkerson. And then I was in lay ministry almost full-time for another 20 years. So I'm a Bible believer, fundamentalist. I'm Orthodox. I believe the Bible's true. You mentioned scripture is philosophy. So I just wanted to clarify that. Are you a Bible believer? Is that what you believe, the Bible was God's words? Or do you believe it's more like literature?
I believe it's allegory, but I believe that it's allegory based on what men and women were receiving, and how they interpret what they were receiving. I also believe that the Bible, when it comes to the Bible, I believe that a lot of the stories that are told are taken from other books, and it's been proven based on my research. And a lot of the stories that are told in there are not as accurate as they're told when they come from the original text. And the reason why I say that is because if you go through the etymology of things, you'll see that a lot of these things and the way they're interpreted in an English language or an Old English language is completely different in the way it was originally written. But overall, I'm going to put it to you like this too. There's a lot of truth in the Bible.
All right. Well, there's no question that the Bible characters that wrote the books brought their own background and influence. You know, Peter was a fisherman. Paul was a scholar. They're not going to write the same way. However, the Bible claims to be written by God. All scripture is inspired by God. 2 Timothy 3:16, meaning God breathed. So if you're a Bible believer, then you believe the words of the book are not literature or the writings, philosophies of men. It claims to be God's word, and people have to decide whether they're going to accept that or not. So that's just to lay that foundation. No scripture is of any man's personal interpretation, but holy men of God as they were moved along by the Holy Spirit. So that's where I'm coming from. And so what we were talking about in the pre-interview was this idea that's very prevalent in the church that it's called sola scriptura, and it's a good concept. It means that the Bible is your final authority in life. Bible meaning basic instructions before leaving Earth. That's what a lot of people will say. So
Right.
if you have a set of principles to live by that work, then the Bible is one of those books, right? So people live according to the Bible teachings. And so, however, the Bible is very cryptic. It's not very pragmatic in a certain way. It doesn't give you a lot of flap A into slop B kind of specificity. And what I believe and I know has happened is the church has been infiltrated by Freemason teaching to dilute the victory that believers could be enjoying. And one of these attack vectors is this false sense of consecration. In other words, the Bible is my final authority, but I can pick up a book written by a guy on, let's say, complex childhood trauma. Let me use that one as an example.
Right.
I had 2 alcoholic parents. My childhood was a total minefield of neglect and abuse. And then I was severely sexually abused by family members. So I'm carrying a boatload of complex childhood trauma. So trauma is you see a car accident or you see somebody die. It's a one-off. Complex trauma is when something awful, awful, awful has happened to you over long periods of time. And it's not like anything you can ever really eliminate. It's like losing your arm. You can get an appendage that will help you get through life, but you basically lost your arm. Okay. So as a believer, 40 years in the church, ministering on the platform, I'm carrying all of this angst and all of this anxiety, depression, fear of man, all these awful, and I'm claiming the promises of God, interceding, praying, fasting, counseling. It's just bouncing off me. And the reason is because of what I call unspecified biblical principles. Okay, so the principles to help guide people out of complex childhood trauma are in the Bible, but they're vague. They're not specific and nuanced in detail. And so it requires people to go into the scriptures and garner the revelation and the depth of that teaching, and then lay it out for you, flap A into slop B. Now, sometimes that's people that don't even know God do that. Okay, so you have, for instance, what we were talking about is this idea of guided imagery. Okay, this term throws 90% of Christians into a complete religious devil tailspin. If you try to suggest that there's any benefit in what's called guided imagery, then you're going to be immediately branded as you're teaching new age stuff. Okay.
Yes. Also, too, John, let's preface that with I heard that, and I thought it was ludicrous from my opinion, right? But to each his own, that vision boards are witchcraft.
Right.
That setting these goals and vision boards are witchcraft. So I just want to put that out there, because a lot of times people make these comments and they don't even really know what they're talking about.
All right, let me go right at vision boards. Okay, so basically, what you're trying to do is you're trying to create the future in advance, like a blueprint. The builder builds the house twice. First, he builds it on paper, then he builds it with wood. Okay, so if you go to Genesis chapter 30, verse 37, you'll read this. Now Jacob took for himself rods of green poplar and of the almond and chestnut trees, peeled white strips in them, and exposed the white which was in the rods. And the rods which he had peeled, he set before the flocks in the gutters, in the watering troughs where the flocks came to drink, so that they should conceive when they came to drink. So the flocks conceived before the rods, and the flocks brought forth streaked, speckled, and spotted. Then Jacob separated the lambs and made the flocks face toward the streaked, and all the brown in the flock of Laban, but he put his flocks by themselves and did not put them with Laban's flock. So basically, Jacob had cut a deal with Laban. All of the sheep that are born spotted will be mine, and all the ones that are not spotted will be yours. And basically, he took rods and put spotted rods in front of the sheep where they mate. And the Bible says that all of the sheep then gave birth to spotted sheep. Okay? Now, the only conclusion that you could draw from that is that the Bible is teaching you that there is a direct correlation to what you hold in your mind and a physical manifestation in the reality. Period.
Bingo.
Period. End of story. Now, is it witchcraft then to take that principle? Oh, I get applause for that one. Excellent.
No, I mean, listen, I'm not well versed in the Bible, and I'll admit that. I never read it through and through. I've read it, and I'm still reading it present day. But there's a lot of things that have been revealed to me in that Bible that I was living before I came across those parables and scriptures. That put it like this: the scripture was manifesting a truth to me that what I was doing wasn't crazy, and how I was living my life was not off course. They was right on course with what Christ was teaching.
Yeah,
okay.
I
just want to make that clear, because actions speak louder than words. So
excellent. Exactly. So what the church does is they implement guilt by association. So you have New Age people over here teaching guided imagery, teaching you that there's value in self-mastery. Hello. The Bible says casting down imaginations, bringing every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. Doesn't that mean we're supposed to control our thoughts? Lord, I'm having all these lustful thoughts all day. Lord, help me. No, you're supposed to cast down the imagination. Self-mastery is taught in that one scripture right there. Okay, but let me give you another one. Mark 11:24. This is Jesus. Therefore, I say to you, all things for which you pray and ask, believe that you have already received them, and they will be granted to you. So that's a prayer principle that Jesus is teaching, that if you want your prayer answered, you have to put it in your mind that you already have it. So you're not continuously begging God to heal you or begging God to help you pay the rent. You ask him according to his word, and then you begin to thank him for it. And then you hold in your emotional realm, your mind. The clearer the picture is, the stronger and the faster the result is. Okay, now, what happens is, if you try to teach that, most Christians will immediately categorize you as a faith prosperity teacher or a New Age teacher, because the church has been infiltrated with that attack vector. It's a false narrative that inculcates a false consecration. Guilt by association is not a biblical principle. Okay, so in other words, the faith prosperity teachers got off into a ditch because they had a wrong emphasis. But what they were teaching wasn't wrong. They were teaching Mark 11:24, and they taught people how to get what they wanted from God. And the same thing with the New Age people, the guys that did The Secret, or anybody that doesn't have a testimony for Christ can teach the principle that is shown clearly in Mark 11:24. If I go teach Mark 11:24, it doesn't mean I'm a New Age guy. I'm just following the teachings of Christ.
Right. And, speaking of legacy of lies, that sounds very similar to what we discussed earlier in our previous episode about the CIA and how they created this concept of conspiracy theorists, that once they put it out there into the ether or into the conscious minds of the general public and society, it became a thing, right? Because before, somebody bringing out truth was never called a conspiracy theorist. They had no name for people who were bringing out truth about the government and all these things, these secret projects. It was just like, oh, that's interesting. We should listen to him. I don't know when the term whistleblower came out, but I do know that word conspiracy theory operates in the same manner. It's basically to completely reject what is true so the false narrative can stay alive. It's like what you were saying. It's like, don't question, because the moment you question, you're the kook. The moment you question, it's like they got to put you back in line with the rest of the sheep, and they got to have you follow. That's what they did with the Okey Pokey, death stick. Is people were like, wait a second, this is not right. This is not right. My son is having all these problems. My son's never had problems. Now he can't even play sports because he's got a heart murmur or something, or he's got myocarditis, and now there's a problem. And then it's like, no, that's not what caused it. What caused it is this. It's just that. And it's this narrative that they stick to. And this I see in a multitude of institutions here in our society around the world. And the only reason I get to see it now is because I see it on the internet, right? I'm not going to all these places, but I'm seeing that same narrative. It's that same, like, you got to be in line. And if you don't believe what we believe in, you're into witchcraft, you're serving Satan, or you're doing something that is wicked. And to me, that shows a lack of respect, because then you're really not in the spirit of Christ at all, because you're condemning. Christ was not about condemning those. I mean, forgive them, Father.
Right.
Forgive them, Father, because they know not what they do. They don't know. They're not knowing what they're doing. They think they do, but they don't. And you can see the pride in it. And that's the part that I don't have no tolerance for, because there's no man or men's or women that are going to tell me what to think in my own mind, because I didn't get that mind from them. I didn't get this body from them. And if the Most High God, if the invisible God that they speak about in the Bible, if that invisible God is within me, like Christ said, that kingdom of heaven is already there. You don't got to search for it. You don't got to look up at the clouds to see if it's opening up the gates for you. It's in you. You have to bring it out. You have to recognize what it is. And the only way you're going to do that is by looking deep within you and not looking to some external force or some type of book. The book is a reference to me, but the book is not totality to me. You understand where I'm coming with that?
Yeah.
It's you. When I look at you, I don't see John Kirwin. I see a spiritual being having a physical experience that I am connected to. That is the same. You're not just my brother in humanity. You're my brother in God, in spirituality. You're my brother in heaven, because the kingdom of heaven dwells in you just as it does with me. That's how I see it. And nobody's going to change that. No matter how many books and parables and scriptures they read to me.
Right. You talked about navigating a manipulated society. That's really what the book is about, that I wrote, where a lot of the navigating that we end up having to do is not so much the conspiracies, but it's the important people in our life, our spouses, our children, our friends, who don't know and don't want to know. They're not looking into these things like we are, and it creates an incredible amount of conflict. I mean, in my own case, it ended up in divorce after 24 years of marriage and 4 kids, which actually ends up, I found out that that's actually quite common, because I have a YouTube channel, Wake Up or Else, on YouTube, and I mean, I have 5,300 subscribers, mostly Christians. Mostly I talk about the Mandela effect. And I'm telling you, I've probably personally interacted with close to 200 people that have been divorced by their spouse because they found out any number of things, like the moon landing is fake, 9/11, Mandela effect, flat earth, you name it, and it just creates this. Well, a lot of it has to do with the mind control that they have been triggered to attack. I call it the death to truther algorithm. So it creates a lot of problems, because what happened with us is we found out that these things put us in danger. We found out that the world is really deadly. It's really dangerous, and the psychos run the thing are going, and we're now being vindicated. I mean, everything around us is being proven to have been right, what we've been saying. Is that not right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like we were looked at to be crazy, and the kooks, like you call it, we were considered to be the ones that um were out there. We were space cadets to a lot of people,
Yeah.
and we were in orbit from their perspective. But then it's like things are starting to be revealed, and some people humbled themselves to say, you know what, I'm sorry, I was wrong. And a lot of things that you brought out are actually true. And now I need to find out for myself because some of these experiences have revealed things to me. But then there's others that don't. You know, um, there's people that have so much pride that even when they feel like this is what's interesting. I had gotten disrespected on my show by somebody who I had a lot of respect for and somebody that I love and care about. And what's interesting is that this person disrespected me blatantly, like a monkey could have saw. My dog could have been like, "Hey, what's going on here? Like, why are you being treated like this?" But then when I brought it to their attention, they told me that they felt like they possibly could have did wrong and shared that with other people. But then wanted me to have other people like a meeting, a council meeting, wanted to call me in like I was out of order, like I was the one that did something wrong. When in actuality, I was operating from not only just, I'm not going to even say the scriptures, but I will bring a scripture out to tell you what type of mode, so to speak, that I went into. And it was Proverbs 19:11. So when I used to have a big time issue with anger. And as you well know, John, if you really hone down on anger, that's a really bad spirit to be in, because that's going to bring a lot of just evil and wickedness into your life. You're not going to really be able to manifest or bring out anything good from the spirit in that spirit of anger. And I felt at that moment, while I was about to get angry, I had to put myself in a certain state because I knew that how I was being approached was disrespectful, but I knew that it was coming from a very limited understanding. Let's just put it like that. And that was Proverbs 19:11. It says that the discretion of a man deferreth his anger, and it is his glory to pass over a transgression. And that in itself, for me, was like eye-opening because I'm like, I'm really getting good at this anger thing where I'm not allowing it to creep into my spirit. But what was sad about the thing is that when it was brought to the attention of other people, the man never apologized, never admitted that he was wrong. It was perceived to be that he could have had the conversation with me offline. But in actuality, that was the obvious. But there was a level of disrespect and a level of anger and pride that came along with the disrespect that you would think, like, if I did somebody, like John, if I called you, let's say if I called you a honky, okay? And
Yeah.
I called you a honky and you're like, hey, Aura, I came to you, I said, John, I spoke to two other people and I was thinking that maybe that was a very disrespectful thing to say to another man and say some racial prejudice slur towards you. And I was thinking maybe I was in the wrong. And then I bring it to your attention and you go, yeah, you know what? You was wrong. And I really felt hurt and disrespected by what you did. But I didn't say anything at the time because we were live on camera and I didn't want that to go any worse than where it was going. So I kept it positive. And then I tell you, you know what? I don't really agree with that. I think we need to bring it to the attention of other people to validate what it is that I was thinking, if I was right or wrong, instead of the person knowing that, hey, they was wrong. I just admitted to them. I just validated it for them. Whatever they were thinking to the person they did it to, the person said, hey, now right then and there, I could have been like, you know what, John, my apologies. Forgive me for calling you a honky. That was wrong of me. Done. Move on. But that's not how my situation went. But it was an eye opener. And I truly believe that everything happens for a reason, and that reason is there to serve you. And I think that that was a marker for me to realize that I really need to be circumspect and who I'm and what I'm dealing with, especially when it comes to my perceptions and my beliefs. Something you mentioned to me that hit home last time, that you said don't fellowship, join a community. And it hit me in my spirit to where I was like, you know what? He's absolutely right, because that's where my spirit's been going anyway. I have a community of people that I'm not really connecting with. I'm connecting with them sometimes. And I need to really connect with a community of like minds instead of a community of unlike minds, right? That's just how I feel right now. That's what I know to be true. And that's what's being revealed to me. I mean, you talk about destiny. I mean, things get revealed in a way where it's like, this is the path you're supposed to be on, and don't let anybody take you off that course based on their level of perception of reality, because everybody has a perception of the reality that they're living. And I choose to be with like minds, and I'm not going to have somebody try to make me think that I did something wrong or that I was in the wrong thinking based on their perceptions, that are very limited at that. So I wanted to bring that up because it was something that I had to make a decision, and I had to meditate on it, and I did. And then there were further things to solidify my decision. And the reality of it, John, is that there's a long legacy of lies that have manipulated people to believe in a certain way. It's these, what I call these compounded false narratives on how we should be and how we interpret things. Some of it I think is complacency. Some of it I think is laziness, when it comes to following certain things that people say they follow, but really don't. And it's that thing that you mentioned earlier about asking God for something and then God showing you what to do, but then you don't do it and you're asking God for the same thing once it happens to you again. It's like God is showing us how to get out of the hole that we dug ourselves in, but we don't want to climb out of it. We don't want to take the necessary steps and actions to climb ourselves out of that hole. It's almost like many people pray that God is going to somehow levitate them out that hole, and then they're going to land on ground.
Yep. It doesn't quite work that way, does it?
No, I mean, I know it's not a Bible verse, but hey, God helps those who help themselves. Ain't that the truth?
Yeah, and you mentioned the perception of reality. You know, the movie They Live talks about a lot of reality. It's an older movie. I finally rented it, and the guy gets these glasses, and he's able to see all the billboards, the magazine covers. They're all saying things like consume, obey the government, all this kind of stuff. And you go, oh, that's crazy. And they're like transmitting this beam that makes you blind. And then there's all these aliens, basically, that have a cloaking technique that most people can't see. It's absolutely the truth. If you've ever studied this reptilian shapeshifter conspiracy, I mean, there's no question. There's reptilians walking among us.
Yeah,
okay?
the David Icke book, Children of the Matrix.
I mean, it is mind-blowing stuff. So the movie is a peek under the hood, right? Well, I remember when I was a little kid, so we're going back like 40 years ago or more, 50 years ago. And then back then there was channel 2, 4, 5, and 7, and 9, and 11. There was 5 channels. And at night, they would actually sign off for the night at 3 a.m. And they'd have da 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 da. They play the Star Spangled Banner, and there would be a flag waving in the breeze, and underneath were the words to the Star Spangled Banner. Well, you can still pull that up on YouTube, and you can see in the words when it wipes across the screen right behind it, just for a half a second, are the exact words that you see in the They Live movie: consume, obey the government, have children, purchase products. All the things that they want us to do have been subliminally fed to us our entire lives through the media. And we are mind control victims. But thank God there's now the Great Awakening. And, the Schumann resonance of the earth has gone off the scale, whatever that means. And God is just lifting the veil. So people are starting to realize, it might start with the right-left paradigm of the Democrat-Republican, when it dawns on them that these guys are part of the same guild. But then it goes deeper, that government isn't really running things. It's the special interest groups that are run by the banks and the corporations. So the corporations actually run everything. No, it's not the corporations either. It goes above that to the Council on Foreign Relations and Bilderberg and all those kind of groups. And then it's not even them. It goes up from there, up, all the way up to like the group of 30, the 13 families and the pin yard, at the very top. These people that probably aren't even human are running the world. Who knows what's happening in the South Pole down there. And so this whole reality that we are observing is completely fabricated. I mean, I just saw a video. I'm going to share it on my next live stream. It's this senator, and she's talking, and there's this really bug-eyed chick behind her. Like, her eyes are like, she barely blinks, and they look like she's been on acid for a month, right? And every word that the senator is saying, this girl is mouthing the words real time, like she's a ventriloquist. I'm thinking, where am I, man? This is the people that are in government are like automaton puppets, or they're totally controlled by these handlers. And, you see Biden supposedly doing a press conference. He's getting on Marine One, the helicopter, and the microphones are along the bottom of the screen, supposedly, and then his hand goes right through the microphones because they're all fake. So we're watching a show and we're trying to analyze what's going on, because we have a sense of self-survival. We're finding out the folks that are in control are basically Luciferian blood-drinking psycho mobsters, and they want us dead. And now they've implemented this eugenics program, which we won't talk about, in its many forms. I mean, there's all kinds of nasty things that they're rolling out. And what are we supposed to do? Well, I'll tell you, the main thing that you want to do is realize that it's a really, really big world, and you're not going to stop what's coming. So you're going to have to decide how you're going to respond to the tyranny. So like my t-shirt, stop the spread of tyranny, take off the mask. Okay. So my response to the fact that God allows free will and we're going into the tribulation is that I am not going to go along with it. I'm not going to try and extend my life by laying low. Okay. I'm going to put myself into the battle, and like a Vulcan, a Klingon. Okay. The Klingons had the great philosophy of a warrior, and Worf would say, today is a good day to die. Right? Right. So we are going to make ourselves projectiles that God can expend onto the battlefield.
Yeah, like William Wallace said, they can take our lives, but they can never take our freedom.
That's right.
There's something I want to bring out in regards to what you said about the Star Spangled Banner, that some may know, some may not. The third verse of the Star Spangled Banner poem and how it's originally written was taken out. Okay. Mm-hmm. Which makes you wonder, what was it all about? Now, the national anthem is composed of 4 verses. So it's actually the 4th verse. And no, it's the 3rd verse. Sorry. It says, one of which makes a distinct reference towards slavery. And in the 3rd verse of his poem, Key states, their blood was washed out of their foul footsteps pollution. No refuge can save their hireling slave from the terror of fight or gloom of the grave. Now, in the 3rd verse, it's very problematic, and that's probably why they took it out, because Key was a slave owner, and he was a slave owner with abolitionist views, and in this verse he mentions slaves and their role in the battle on both American and on the British side. Now I'm going to read to you this real quick. And the third verse, it says, "This 4th of July, here's an American story of us we're never taught. After we had brutally enslaved black people for almost 200 years, some escaped and joined British Army to fight America in the War of 1812. And they were called colonial Marines. Why join the British? To get freedom. Remember, blacks have been enslaved in America since 1619, and freedom is nowhere in sight." It also states that in August of 1814, the colonial Marines were part of the British troops that attacked the American outside of D.C. and drove them back into the city, setting the White House on fire. One of the Americans who witnessed it was Francis Scott Key, and he's the famous writer of what we now call the poem of the Spangled Banner that we sing. Now, the lyric says, "No refuge could save the hireling slave from the terror of fight or gloom of the grave, and the Star-Spangled Banner in triumph doing wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave." So what I find interesting, and let me bring you back here, John. I think I lost you for a second here.
My computer just turned off and it's trying to boot up and it's going through this whole thing that's going to take a while. It's never happened before. So we must be hitting a nerve. I'm not sure.
Hey.
I'm on my phone. Is it okay if I'm on my phone?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. You're back.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So what I was basically bringing out is that this third verse was very much manipulated and taken out, right? Because if they would have left that in there, a lot of people wouldn't want to sing slavery. They don't want to give praise to slavery.
Right.
And this is just a prime example of how things can be tweaked. It's called, you ever heard of the Kaizen theory?
No.
Kaizen method? It's basically, the way I like to explain it is tweaking something that you're doing just slightly so that you can get significant improvements. So
Right.
my best description of that is, remember when the paper towel came out, you had this big sheet that you would rip off, brawny or whatever they call, and people were using it, but somebody had the insight and intuition and foresight and ingenuity to say, how can we be more effective in bringing this out? So they brought the perforation in the middle. So now you only have to use a portion of the paper towel to wipe off what you need it for, instead of having a whole big one that you don't really need to use all of it for. So not only do you get more out of the paper towel, but you save money and you get to use it more efficiently. That's what the Kaizen theory is. But that same thing is utilized for manipulation in a sense of this song right here, the Star-Spangled Banner. A lot of our history is done the same way. They give you these half-truths and then they put a lot of lie in, so it completely leads you astray, but you're still giving energy to the original format in which it was given.
Right.
And that, to me, is what happens a lot with the doctrines, with the institutions of science, religion, education, medicine, and many other things. Because when you look at the pharmaceutical industry, pharmakia is actually witchcraft. If you want to get technical on what's witchcraft, pharmakia is that. Okay. And a lot of people have been discovering, based on what they call new age religion, which is really old age teachings, that, hey, you could do fasting, you can eat these certain herbs. There's people that are being cured from diabetes and HIV and all other stuff from taking herbs and different fruits and vegetables. But the doctors of Western civilization will have you believe something else, and they'll want to keep you alive just enough to stay sick so that they can keep profiting off of you. Sure. That's another big legacy of lies, is this whole health care industry. It's bananas. I could tell you that from my own experiences, I don't take any pharmaceutical products, and I'm just fine at 45 years old. I can't say that about a lot of other family members. They're suffering. Some of the people in my family are suffering with their weight, with a lot of things. And if they would just take the contaminated milk out of their diet, taking the sugar that they filled their artificial sugars and all these other things, they would be feeling a lot better. But no matter how much you tell them, they won't listen to you. But if somebody else told them that they don't know from a hole in the wall, they'll probably believe them before they believe you, even though you're a living example of that. Let me ask you a question. When it comes to these legacy of lies, and you started becoming a truth seeker, what was one of the biggest legacy of lies that you came across when you was like, wow, you said, I cannot believe that they have put the veil over people's lives with this information?
Right. Well, that's a great question. I think 9/11 was a seminal moment for a lot of people. Because
Absolutely.
9/11, what you realized when you started to see the evidences, the clues that 9/11 wasn't what we were being told, like, of course, Building 7 made no sense. And then you had architects for 9/11 Truth, where you had 2,000 architects sign affidavits. And they're like, look, I build these buildings and I demolish them. Okay. And what I'm telling you is Building 7 was brought down with controlled demolition, period. Okay. And you're like, I'm convinced. Well, then what you realize is the media had to be in on it. So now the net gets bigger and your mind is just going, what? What? And so then the more you see, the more you see. So now you start thinking, well, if that's not true, what else isn't true? The pharmaceutical industry, like you're saying, is not anything like what we think. The military industrial complex, they make more money in one day of war than a year of peace. So you have continuous war going on. And also it benefits them to call the population in control countries and bring them to their, control, centralized power. That's really the thing. And so you just go down the rabbit hole, and then your family members think you're obsessed because you keep finding out another thing. The latest one for me that really was like a gut punch was the transpocalypse. Now, if you don't know what the transpocalypse is, there's a lot of people on YouTube. I've got some stuff on my channel where it's really easy to see the anatomical clues. The shape of the male skull is different than the shape and size of the female skull. Right. The slant of the shoulder, the woman's ring finger is longer than the man's. And so you could see pictures of, Michelle or Michael Obama, and her ring finger is longer, and you're like, she's a man. And then and so what happens though, is you start to then analyze the people on the TV. And what you find is most of them are not, like, the men are women and the women are men. And you start freaking out because I call it, well, no, not them. So, and what did it for me was there was a model that was on the front cover of Playboy that was the first tranny centerfold, right? So she is a guy. Her Wikipedia page says she's a guy, her bio, and Playboy is telling you she was a guy. Okay. And this man girl is the most, she's as beautiful as any woman could be. Let's put it like that. Well, that was a template for me to be able to accept it, because even if somebody's telling you this person is a guy, your brain doesn't want to accept it, because these are like A-list female actresses right on down the line. Taylor Swift, okay, is a guy. And you look at her and she's gorgeous, but no, she's a guy. And you start saying, no, not her. And then a lot of the guys are women. And so the governor of the state and his wife are both opposites in most cases. The CEOs of companies that are women are actually men, and the military. Yeah. I mean, it's so unsettling because what it means is that these are not people that are just living out their sexuality in private, okay? Because it's so many of them, it has to be some sort of controlled breeding program where the people are created in the labs and then put into these positions of authority. And that's another thing, is you start to get into like studying the whole clone conspiracy or simulants and robots, and you realize that you're in some sort of petri dish. You're in a maze like a mouse, and you feel powerless and totally freaked out, and you can't analyze like politics. You can't try to figure out what's going on in the political realm if the senator is a puppet, right? The person behind the senator is the ventriloquist mind control handler, and you're just listening to some puppet. It's like there's 5 levels of reality behind everything we're seeing, and it's very difficult to manage. And that's what you're going through. And then your spouse and your kids are like fun seasons in the sun. They're planning the vacation. They want to watch movies, which you can't watch anymore because it's filled with predictive programming, and all this stuff is happening in real life is in the movie, and you know it and they don't. And then, they just want for you to just be like you used to be when you were fun, because they don't like you anymore when you become a kook. When you become a conspiracy theorist, kook, nut job, trafficking in the dark corners of the internet, living in your mom's basement, they don't like you anymore. And you're like, I'm sorry the truth makes you mad, but, the world's run by Luciferians, blood-drinking psycho monsters, and I can't just do life like I've been doing it. That's basically where you're at.
Yeah, and I even had a guy that I was going to bring on my show, and I had mentioned to him about these Luciferians and Satanists, and then he was like, "Oh, don't tell me you believe in that." I said, "Absolutely. It's not even about me believing it. It's just a fact. I mean, there's no refuting it no more." And of course, I never heard back from him. A guy that wanted to come on my show, and it's just like, what really disappoints me is how people can't agree to disagree.
Right.
To me, it's just like, why? If that is your perception, why not have respect? What's interesting though is when I've dealt with certain Muslims, with certain Buddhists, and Hindus, they're very respectful in what I believe in.
Yeah.
They're not like, "Oh, I can't talk to you," and you're wicked. I only dealt with that mostly with Christians.
Well, that's part of the program. It's part of what I call the death to truther algorithm, where they attack you personally. Right. They won't engage you in intelligent discourse. They automatically go to ad hominem attacks because that's the mind control narrative that's been modeled.
Now, can you explain what ad hominem attacks means?
Yeah, it means don't listen to him. He's stupid. You're crazy. So you attack the messenger, and then that undermines the message. And it's very subtle sometimes. What I was called obsessed a lot. Well, I took a step back from that one day, and I said, what does that mean, obsessed? And it means, to be inordinately consumed with something. Okay, but that's just your perception. Okay, the reality is you're apathetic. Okay, because if somebody's in a burning building, you need to be obsessed. Right? That's what happened to us, is we discovered the fraud, we discovered the danger we're in, and we're a little worked up about it. Okay, I don't take kindly to being slow killed and enslaved, and I take issue with that. Why don't you take issue with that? Right? So what happens is obsessed becomes an attack vector. Okay, because what obsessed means is this. This is what it meant to me in my real life. It means you have a character flaw that is disqualifying you from being my teacher or being my guide, because you're obsessed means you have a major character flaw. And what you have to do is you have to first go off and fix that. In other words, shut up
And then once you're no longer, compromised, then you'll be able to talk to me about the flat earth and the moon landing and all that. Okay, so what that's like is a guy that has 3 DUIs, okay, over here. And then he goes over to Uber and he says, I'd like to work for you. And they say, you can't come over here and work for us because you have this problem over here. So you're obsessed means you have 3 DUIs and you can't talk to us, right? That's what that means. That's an attack vector. That's what I go into in the book, is I teach you how to identify the attack vectors and then how to respond to them. Because the primary one is to disparage you. It's to slime you. It's to shame you into silence. So one of the things is I realized after being silent for 2 years, the last 2 years I was with my wife and kids in the house, I basically said nothing about nothing. I mean, I would go to the dinner table and I would just sit there and eat my meal and almost say nothing the whole time because they told me, shut up or else. So, okay.
Is that why you called your platform Wake Up or Else?
No, it was already that. But basically, what I've learned from that 2-year period is that doesn't work because the relationships continue to deteriorate because it's still the elephant in the room. You're still a kook because they know what you believe. And what would happen was we would be watching a movie, let's say. I'd be watching like some Marvel superhero movie with my kids or something. And the term conspiracy theorist would come up on the show. And then everybody would kind of look at me and snicker. Well, that's very disrespectful. And I don't appreciate it. And then it would come up in conversations. And so I learned to say this, excuse me, I may be mistaken, but I am not crazy. And I'd appreciate it if you didn't invoke that term because it's very disrespectful. That helped me. Like, that's $1 million secret right there, because I was getting slimed a lot. And guess what? We're the ones that's right. We're not deceived. We know the truth and they're deceived. And they keep sliming us over and over. And I'm like, this is bogus, man. I'm sick of this.
What you just described, too, is how a clinical psychologist would tell one of their patients on how to deal with gaslighting with a narcissist that they're in a relationship with. And one of the ways to respond when you're being gaslighted, say, excuse me, that's not how I remember it. This is how I remember the situation going down. And that's what I'm sticking to. I'm sorry that you don't see it that way, but this is how I see it. And you're not going to change how I see things.
Right.
And the reason why that's so important is because when you're being gaslighted, people that are the gaslighters want you to interpret their version of the reality of the experience.
Yep.
And if 99.9% of the time, their version is a lie. And if you're with these type of people for a long period of time, those lies become a legacy. That is the legacy. Not only the legacy for them, but the legacy of your union and your relationships with them. You wind up engaging to the point where you no longer have your own thoughts and you suppress any thought just so you can get along with the environment or with the people that you're communicating with. And to me, I can't do that. I can't do that because to me, that's not living my authentic life. That's not what I came here for. And that's not my purpose. My purpose is not here to please man. My purpose here is to have an experience and to learn and to be able to ascend into a higher understanding of consciousness and spirit. And so I could connect higher with the spirit. No different than what Christ did. Because the more I learn about Christ, let me tell you something about Christ, is that more I learn about that brother, more I understand, like, he was willing to sacrifice everything to be one with the heavenly spirit, the source of all divine creation, the Father, as is spoken of in scriptures. And he was willing to sacrifice everything he knew about himself, everything that he had here, everything that he could have became and sacrificed that all to go back to the divine source of creation and to be one with that and not to be part of this human experience anymore. And to me, that's pretty amazing because you have to detach yourself from everyone and everything. And that's not an easy thing to do because we
Yeah.
have attachments. That's why in the Tibetan culture, when one of the relatives dies, what they believe is that when you are praying after the person is deceased and they're right there on the, on the slab and the coffin or whatever they're at, I remember one of the priests was saying, do not cry because you don't want the soul to get attached to this realm. It has to ascend. It has to go back. And a lot of times souls get trapped here because they are attached to the physical. They're attached to the material world. They're attached to the emotions of their loved ones suffering and not wanting them to go, wishing that they were still here. And that keeps them here. So I remember him telling one of the women that was crying profusely. He said, don't do that. Take yourself out the room, come back in a better spirit and pray that your brother, uncle, whoever that was to her, that they ascend, that they go back to heaven, that they don't stay stuck here. And I thought that was quite amazing. And I think that that's a lot of what people don't understand is that we have these doctrines of old and they're telling us something, but our interpretation, we try to humanize it. We try to humanize everything. And the scriptures specifically state that we're not supposed to idol worship. We're not supposed to venerate man. That's foolish of us. But somehow we've humanized the spiritual experience that's not a human experience. We're just an extension of that, right? We're just connected to that, but we're not all encompassing of what spirituality is. Everything has spirit in it, right? So my next question for you is the 9/11 thing, right? When it happened, I saw the buildings collapse. Right now, we all know that that's called pulling, and that's a demolition thing.
Yeah.
But I was actually believing when they put it out there in the news that it was the engine fuel that burned those buildings down.
Yeah.
And I remember that the architect said there was no engine fuel in history that would ever bring out a building because they weren't meant to come down. The only way they can be brought down is through demolition explosives. So when you went through that experience, what was like the first thing that didn't sit well with you?
Oh, I could tell you. It's a great question. Well, I watched Loose Change or one of those documentaries, and they showed 3 different commercial airliners that had bird strikes on the cone of the plane. So, an airplane is not made of like 3-inch steel. It's made of aluminum. It's got to be light. And so these planes had run into birds and the entire cone was crushed in. Okay. It was all dimpled and pushed in from birds. Okay. And what they showed is what the media showed us was the plane hitting this building, going through who knows what, steel girders, cement, and then coming out the other end. You could see just for about 2 seconds the shape and the picture of the cone perfectly shaped comes out the other side, and then boop comes back. So whatever effect they did to use it, they didn't do it right, and it came out the other end perfectly intact. And that's when I knew it was fake. That's what the mainstream news showed us. The nose cone coming out the other side of the building perfectly intact. Impossible.
And the truth is coming out. Like the truth is coming out in so many different ways when it comes to the old narratives that have had life here for quite some time. They've had people pushing these narratives with great conviction, right? And the thing is that most people in society do not want to think for themselves. They want somebody to tell them what to think. They want somebody to lead them, not understanding that they are being led by something far greater. And that is the truth that's been revealed to me, is that there's something far greater. Some people call it God, the Most High, the Creator, the universe, the divine, but there's something far greater that is in control, and is in control in a way where it's just allowing things to be experienced. It doesn't have to worry. It doesn't have to be jealous. It doesn't have any of these human emotions. All right. The God source does not have that. That's only a physical, three-dimensional thing here that we experience. But John, what I was saying to you was this, is that the big eye opener when I got off the spell of engine fuel was when they found the passport that was completely intact of one of the so-called hijackers, that it miraculously fell out the plane, and a passport on the floor, and they found it. That's what I said. When I saw that, I said, whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay, now this I don't believe. So let me look further into this. And then eventually I started coming across information that dispelled all of the different narratives that were given by the media, because that one was bogus to me. It's like, you mean to tell me a piece of paper, a passport, is not going to burn to a crisp? It's going to be completely intact of one of these so-called hijackers? It just happened to be one of the hijackers' passport that fell out of the plane. Well, nobody else's, just a hijacker.
That is one of those things that I believe is done on purpose. So they have these very complex deceptions that require incredible logistics, and they pull it off. What they have to put, because the matrix is a physical construct, but it's also a metaphysical thing. And in order for the matrix to be able to bamboozle you and shut, basically, it gets you to shut your brain off. They have to put in to the deception clues that are super obvious. And if they do that and you still accept it, that gives the demons permission to give you a stronghold of blindness where you can't perceive it. Because Jesus said they have eyes, but they perceive not. So they see the same data that we see, but they just cannot bring themselves to come to the conclusion because they're under a spell. They're bewitched. And that's why, because they put these ridiculous clues. Like the one that I saw that really made that real to me was there were like 4 different shootings and bombings in the space of about 6 months one time. And they had the exact same crisis actor. It was a lady in all 4 of these things. They were all in different parts of the country. She had a different name, a different backstory, different hair color, but it was the exact same lady. And you could see if you put them all on the same screen and she's talking, you're like, oh my gosh, it's the exact same lady. Well, do you think they could have gotten somebody else as a crisis actor? Of course they could. So they did that on purpose to put it in front of you, so that if you see stuff like that, and we all see that as truthers, we show these things to our normie family, and they just go, well, what difference does it make? I still have to go to work, don't I? Or whatever they say, and you're just like, what? We don't get it.
Absolutely. I have a question for you, because especially when it comes to doctrines and the way people believe in how they interpret spirituality and their relationship with God, what I see a lot, and it's not just with the institutions, but just with people overall, with time, I've seen this. I'm going to read something to you. What's the key difference between misinformation and disinformation? And it's that misinformation refers to a false or inaccurate information that is unintentionally spread.
Yeah.
While disinformation refers to false or misleading information that is intentionally spread with the purpose of deceiving or manipulating others. And I wanted to get your take on that, because I see both of those things playing out in modern day society when it comes to how we live our lives and how we share information with each other.
Oh, that's a cool question, because you've got like Snopes and controlled media that is supposedly a truth, a fact checker, right? But they're the ones that are actually disinfo. They're disseminating lies on purpose. Whereas the truther community, like yourself and myself and others, are independent journalists. So we don't have an agenda except finding out the truth. We're not controlled by a corporate, there's nobody paying us to do this. So we basically just want the truth. So if we say something that's incorrect, it's only misinformation, but there's no agenda behind it, right? And so we have to then, but the disinfo is targeting us. So for instance, here's a good example. Here's an article from the International Studies, the Milderberry Institute of International Studies. It says the New World Order, the historical origins of a dangerous modern conspiracy. Now, this is the entire data sphere talks like this. Psychology Today, the DS5, all of the outlets that say the New World Order conspiracy theory posits that a cabal of elites is working behind the scenes to orchestrate global events to enslave the global populace. The New World Order theory's anti-Semitic origins cause adherents to intentionally or unintentionally propagate harmful anti-Semitic narratives. Social media companies must address New World Order content on their platforms for its potential to incite hate and offer violence. Okay, so there's no such thing as the deep state. That's the official narrative. And then along comes Donald Trump. Here's the Washington Examiner. Trump unveils sweeping plan to shatter the deep state. All right, so you've got the entire data sphere over here, and you got this guy who is the president, was the president, now he's the front runner for the next election, and he's saying, if you vote for me, I'll eliminate the deep state. So now you have to choose. This is new info for a lot of normies. This guy Trump, who most of them would vote for, is telling you that the deep state messaging is disinfo. All right. So what are you going to do with that info? Which one do you believe? Is it this one or this one? So that's what's happening now is it's raining red pills on the normie. And they are, they've got to be tribulating, they've got to be starting their worldview is collapsing around the edges. And wait till the alien thing really gets fired up and released completely. I think in the next 12 months, we're going to have the alien disclosure bro.
Yeah, raining red pills. Sometimes you say stuff since I've met you in just a short period of time I've gotten to know you. You say these comments, and I'm like, that's a whole show right there. That's the title for a show, Raining Red Pills.
It's raining red pills.
Raining RRP. Speaking of legacy of lies, back in season 1 and season 2 of my podcast, I really went deep into Agenda 2030. I have this whole series called Agenda Do You Dirty. Yeah. So it's in reference to Agenda 2030. And there couldn't be more of lies than the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Do you know anything about that?
A little bit.
Okay, so let's go over some of these because I definitely want to get your perception on this stuff because this stuff is insanity. But they try to paint. See, what they do a lot is they put lipstick on a pig, right? And they try to make pigs look pretty, but it's still just a pig that you put lipstick on. And the 17 sustainable goals for Agenda 2030 are no different. Okay. First one is no poverty. End poverty in all its forms everywhere. What do you think about that? What do you think is the real deception behind ending poverty?
Well, first of all, you can look this up. I'll do it now, but just from memory, if you Google how much does it cost to end world hunger, it's like 20 billion a year.
Really?
Or something like that. Yeah, I'll do it right now. Hold on.
I think didn't they just give like 20 billion to Ukraine?
Oh yeah. How much would it cost to end world hunger? It's a staggeringly low amount. All right, so according to estimates from the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, an annual investment of 267 billion is needed to achieve zero hunger. You don't think we can print 267 right without breaking a sweat? And so they don't want to end world hunger. They love world hunger. They want the Georgia Guidestones to come to pass. They want to reduce the population to 500 million. World hunger is their go-to.
Well, that's the next one. But before we go into world hunger, what did you think about the Georgia Guidestones blowing up or exploding?
Yeah, some people said it was the sign to the elites. It's now time to call the herd. Others said it's the white hats, showing the patriots that they're about to turn the tables, and both have legitimacy. The white hat scenario has legitimacy. I've been watching it for 5-6 years. When the white hats are like Juan O'Savin, Mel K, Charlie Ward, Simon Parks, General Flynn. All these guys are all Freemasons. They're all the same. It's two wings of the same bird, just like the Democrat Republican, except their scenario ends up ushering in a period of renaissance where they bring in the med beds, they release all the technologies that have been suppressed, and humanity goes into a period of prosperity. So most likely, if the white hats prevail, we can end up, dying of old age instead of going to a COVID camp, right? Which I would prefer. I don't know about you, but ultimately it's the same ending in Book of Tribulation or Revelation, ends in the tribulation.
Yeah. I really have no fear of death at all. I just know that I'm just here for an experience. I'm not even from this world. So that's where I'm at. Like Christ said, that we need to be, we're in this world, but we're not of this world. We don't need to be of this world because we're not. And there's so much proof to prove that to be true. Yes, this world is not the first place I've been to as far as the entity of the soul. That it just came here to visit for whatever time. Has it been here before? Absolutely. But this is not the only place it's been. But that's my understanding. And it is mine. And I own it. And I am very confident in that understanding. The second 17th sustainable goal for developmental goal is to end world hunger. It says end hunger, achieve full security, and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. And like you were just saying about how much it costs. When I look at this zero hunger sustainable goal, I look at it as a joke because they can end hunger now. But supposedly they're going to do this. But what this is doing is no different than what Bill Gates is doing when he's buying all of the land and giving us this synthetic fake meat and all of this other poisonous types of foods that they want to distribute. That's what they mean by world hunger. Every time they give us something that seems positive, it's really the opposite.
I know. And it's clear that they want
does.
They want
what Satan does.
I mean, if they wanted to, they could just kill us off. But it seems like they want to slow kill us. I know this is true because then they can bleed us of our wealth. So they're kind of like psycho-capitalists. They want us dead, but they want to kill us slowly because they also relish the control. They're control freaks. So if you watch Bill Gates interviewed, he actually is giddy when he says there's another pandemic coming. Like, oh, what do you know that we don't know? And he like giggles about it. It's really creepy. So they don't want, to just kill us off. They want to enslave us and then put us in 15-minute cities. Because, if you read Isaiah 14, Satan says, I will be like the Most High. I will ascend to the hills of the north. I'll walk among the stones of fire. And he says all these things like, I. Call it the 5 eyes. So he doesn't want everybody dead. He wants everybody to worship him instead of God. So he has to figure out how to enslave us into worshiping him instead of God. That's why Christians are always singled out for attack because they refuse to do that. So a lot of that's going to be done through technology and deception, like the Project Bluebeam and the holograms, and then of course all the chemicals and quantum dot technology that's in the is it's actually it's an artificially intelligent parasite, and it just changes you. So they're creating the Borg. They're creating people that can be easily enslaved because you could turn on a bunch of the functionalities of the quantum dot. There's 33 different functionalities, and they can be triggered at will by frequencies. I've seen the patents for that.
Oh, right. And I don't want to get too much into that because I don't want to get flagged.
Yeah.
If we start talking about that, this channel will get terminated permanently.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I forgot about that.
So let's I might even have to edit that because I might get flagged for what you just said right there. And you see, this is what I'm working around too, because probably what I'll do with you next is we'll have a no holds bar discussion, you and I, and we'll do it on Rumble. Rumble lets me say whatever the hell I want to say with no interruption. Right. But let's go to the third one. It says good health and well-being. Ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. Reduce the global maternal mortality ratio to less than 70 per 100,000 live births, and preventable deaths of newborns and children under 5 years of age, which we all know that those numbers are increasing, and we won't go there. And the epidemics of AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria, and neglected tropical diseases, and combat hepatitis, waterborne diseases, and also strengthen the prevention and treatment of substance abuse. And by 2020, half the number of global deaths and injuries from road traffic accidents. So you see all these things. Ensure universal access to sexual and reproductive healthcare services. These are all legacies of lies, right? Because what I find even interesting is that the target is by 2020 for some, but for most it's 2030. Like you were saying earlier that Charles Schwab pushed things back. So that's good health and well-being. Anything you have for that one until I go on to the next sustainable goal?
Yeah, they're talking about themselves being healthy, not us. They always do that. They talk about how wonderful the Patriot Act is. They give it a nice name, Patriot Act, but it's really to enslave you act. That's what it really is. So all of their terminology is used to mind control you into thinking that they're for you. They're public servants. This is all for the betterment of mankind. This is to protect you or to protect society. All of it is designed to do one thing: to centralize power with them, control the masses, and get rid of everybody that's uncooperative. Because what they envision ultimately is to merge with machines and live forever in sin. Like that's portrayed in all the movies you can name. And they're not quite there yet, so they still need their technicians and their servants, but everybody else is gone in their mind. And then eventually they'll get rid of even the human servants and technicians, and they'll all be robots, because the robots will never tire and they'll never turn on. And that's what they envision, like you've seen in Asylum, or what's that movie with Matt Damon? There's so many movies where they just show you their mindset and how what they plan to do.
Absolutely.
But it's not going to work. God's going to intervene, and he's going to stop this from actually happening. So they're not going to win. And
it's already happening. I mean, the intervention has been happening and always will. Nothing will go as according to plan. The next one is education, quality education. Ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. That, if that's not a hoax, I don't know what is. Because especially here in the United Shenanigans of America, I think we have it's already statistically been proven that across the globe, in other countries, we're really ranked low when it comes to quality of education.
Well, I mean, it's deeper than that. When they say quality education, they mean quality brainwashing, quality enslavement.
Right.
Like Rockefeller gave the Dulles brothers $20 million, and that's when the public school system was born. And they said that the design of the public school system was to indoctrinate the young people into their worldview. And so it's just word speak. It's word salads that, sound good so that people won't rise up and eliminate these people. But what it really means is, what they're really going to do, which is might makes right. If you've ever watched mobster movies, the mobsters justify their lifestyle by saying things like, well, if you're stupid enough to let me rob you, then you deserve it. That's how they think.
Yeah, absolutely. Gender equality, your thoughts? Is they say achieve gender equality, empower women and girls, end all forms of discrimination against women and girls everywhere.
Right. So that means end obedience to God's order, which is God created Adam and Eve. And that's the order of things. This is God's universe. It's not your universe. To come in and then basically go against what God has created and create all these different abominations and make up your own world.
This is the thing with me, is that I feel that women and men are essential to harmony in life, right? You can't have one without the other. And at the end of the day, everybody gets born out of a womb. Everybody comes out of a womb of a woman. So there's a lot of there's a lot of disinformation when it comes to that. The next one is clean water and sanitation. Ensure availability of sustainable management of water and sanitation. I'm going to read through a couple here for the sake of time.
Yeah. Okay. Clean water, as long as your credits, your social credit score is appropriate. Like right now in China, they have your blood sample, your DNA, your fingerprints, and they can even track you by your gait, the way you walk. Like if they can't see your face. So if you jaywalk, they immediately deduct the fine from your bank account, and then a bulletin goes out to all these different places, the transportation, restaurants, banks, and immediately, you are now sanctioned. So you have limited or no access to these different social services until you pay your fine to society of penalty of 3 weeks or whatever it is. That's automatic. Okay, so clean water will be provided as long as you're in compliance. That's what that means.
Now, speaking of that, I'm going to play a clip here for you. It says WEF wants to put a price tag on water for common good. Now, listen to this.
Not only in terms of monetary values, but also in terms of governance, in terms of recognizing water as a commons that we now need to manage as a broad systems approach. So that's why this commission is not only necessary, but urgent to take this challenge on. Not only have we not focused on economics of water, when we have focused on water, we've only focused on drinking water, domestic water, and that is roughly 150 liters per person per day, which is what the wealthy are using. It's a review on the economics of water, and we will be looking at the value of water and considering different novel economic policy measures, which one may be, for example, putting some form of price on water in order to guide and give incentives, but not as a price to punish those who are poor, but rather to reward those that are stewards of fresh water for the common good. So this is quite an exciting moment, and now we need.
There you go. He said exactly what I just said. I summarized it, but he just stated what I just said, which is they'll use the resource of clean water as a control mechanism to keep you in line.
Right. Absolutely. And let's go into the next one, because this is what I'm saying. Everything that's listed on this goal list is actually the opposite of what they actually really want to do. And the next one is, let me go right to it here. The next one on the 17 sustainable goals for 2030 is affordable and clean energy. Okay. Now, affordable and clean energy is already available. All right. We as a society don't even have to spend money on energy. But of course, we know that the oligarchs have to make money, right? They have to be in control. We can't have anything for free. You also have decent work and economic growth. Decent work promotes sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. Sustain per capita economic growth in accordance with national circumstance. Achieve higher levels of economic productivity through diversification, technological, and ungrandized or ungrading and innovation. Promote development oriented policies that support productive activities, decent job creation. Let's go to the next one.
Hold on, let me make a comment because that is so
Yeah, sure.
unbelievable.
Yeah, please comment
First of
on
all,
the ones that I just went over.
Yeah,
if you
they
can.
went to Tesla went to JP Morgan when he had 0 point energy, and like, this is unlimited free energy device with no moving parts. It'll last forever. One house has a box, size of a bread box. It'll power their whole house forever. And JP Morgan's like, can I put a meter on it and make money on it? No. Okay, well, I can't do it. So then that whole thing disappeared. So there's 0 point energy. We've had it for decades, if not longer. They had it back in
Tesla.
but they had it in Egypt in the pyramids. They had it before history, right? So that's ridiculous. And then secondly, I'm American State National. I work with people who have accessed their trust. So when you're born, they borrow $1 million against you as surety, and they invest that, in securities. It's probably worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and they were supposed to give that to us. We should be living lives of productivity and just pursuing whatever we want to, but we're debt slaves. We're taxed to death. We have to work ourselves to death. So we don't have any time to be active. So we're enslaved in a slave matrix, and we are actually love it. Like, people are giddy about paying their taxes. If you don't pay your taxes, you'll be called a tax cheat. The tax system is totally voluntary, and there's a revocation. Well, I show
according to the
people,
Constitution.
Yeah, I work with people, and we show you how to follow the process for revocation of election, and then you zero out all because income is based on terminologies, which mean that you basically have to be a government official to be taxed. They tax their own, but those of us that are not government officials or publicly elected officials are not subject to tax. It's all just word salads. And once you understand it and you understand how to do the paperwork, you're able to extricate yourself from that. So that whole idea of providing, what was the word they used? Reputable work or something like
decent work.
Decent work. Wait, right. We should be living like kings off of the system that has been created for us, which, by the way, people are going in and accessing their CESQB trusts. They're living off of this trust. You can do it. It's not easy. You come in at an ecclesiastical level, so you got to know your stuff, and you got to live in the private. But you can either just have it pay all your bills. If you need a house, you just sign here, and you give this CESQB number, and boom, it's paid for. Or you can get all access to it, where you have access to hundreds of millions of dollars. And they're talking about doling out little jobs that are adequate. I'm just as infuriating. Anyway, go ahead.
Okay. Next one on the list is industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation.
Centralized power under a few people.
To me, that's the Hunger Games. If you ever seen the Hunger Games, that's exactly, they want to put us into districts. That's the infrastructure that they're creating as we speak.
Yeah, 15-minute cities, and they deindustrialize countries, so they're in poverty, and then you have an elite like Saddam Hussein had like 15 castles. Prince Charles is out there telling you not to use hot water to conserve energy, but he has 15 castles and 3 jets, 2 helicopters, his own private train. And these are how the elite live. And then they lecture us. Obama goes over to Africa and says, you can't have a car and air conditioning. That's how they think. So that's what that term means. It's just consolidating power to them.
Absolutely. The next one is reduce inequalities. Reduce inequality within and among countries. Progressively achieve and sustain income growth of the bottom 40% of the population at a rate higher than the national average. Empower and promote social and economic and political inclusion of all.
Yeah,
that sounds like one world religion, one world economic system, one world health system.
Right. And the idea of equality is a false concept. In other words, you're never going to have equality. There's white people and there's black people. Jesus said, you'll always have the poor among you. What is noble is fairness and a level playing field. But if I work 14 hours a day and you sit around and watch Netflix, I deserve to have more than you. It doesn't work if I go off and risk, starting a business, and I risk being in the street, and I work 14 hours a day and study all the time. Meanwhile, you just are partying, and then, I end up making $1 million, right? And then you look at me, I have a brand new car, you have a junker, I live in a nice house, you live in a slum, and then you're jealous, and you say, well, that's not fair. We should force the government to force the guy, the rich, wicked, rich guy, to have equal distribution. Well, that doesn't work, because then if you take away the incentive to get superabundance, then the people that are willing to do that won't do it. Why would I work all the time if you're just going to take 90% of it, like they do in France? You get taxed at like 60%. Because they think, well, if you make $1 million, 400,000 is enough for you to live on. Isn't that enough? Well, after $1 million, they take like 90%. So what happened is all the rich people moved. Money goes where it's treated well. So
yeah, that's why a lot of people move to Singapore.
Yeah,
Singapore has some of the most wealthiest people in all of the world, all in one area.
Yeah.
I want to go to the next one because I want to get to the 17th before we end this show. And
all right.
This is a good way to bring out these legacy of lies, because this is another blueprint for legacy of lies here. Number 11 is sustainable cities and communities. You kind of talked about that with the smart cities. It says make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable.
Well, the whole premise is a lie. I saw a study that showed that you could feed the entire world just from the real estate of Africa. There is no shortage. It's all manufactured. Sustainable means we're running out of space and we're running out of food, we're running out of water. You've got an oceans of water, and you could use desalinization to create all the fresh water you want for all of humanity, so there's no water shortage. Okay, the water tables below are untapped, so there's no water shortage. There's no shortage of food.
They did that in Bolivia, right? They try to this company called, I believe they were called Caltech. They literally try to monopolize the water in Bolivia, and the Bolivian people overthrew the government.
Nestle did that too. Nestle bought up all the water rights. So there's going to be water wars, but it's basically a controlled shortage. Just like diamonds, the price of diamonds is kept high by certain diamond cartels that keep the supply low so they can keep the price high. So that's what they're doing with that.
Number 12, responsible consumption and production. Ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. Implement the 10-year framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production patterns on countries taking action. Will develop countries taking the lead, taking into account the development and capabilities of developing countries.
Read the first sentence again. The first sentence.
Implement the 10-year framework of
No,
programs.
the one you just read. You started out reading about.
Ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. That's goal number 12.
Well, this one is basically getting a buy-in. It's so amazing how many people are willing to do their part. Okay, they're going to chip in and live in a little 400 square foot cubicle to help humanity survive the climate crisis, which is completely caused by weather, technology like scalar waves and HARP. And they're creating all of these weather anomalies and droughts to trick you into thinking that man is causing, and we have to go live in a closet and not have any hot water, like Prince Charles said, and not have a refrigerator or a car, like Obama said, so that we can save humanity. So all these people are noble, but they're totally deceived. It's all fake. So I refuse. I'm going to turn the AC up, okay? I'm going to have a hot shower. Shut up.
Right. And what's interesting, too, is target 12.4 by 2020, achieve environmentally sound management of chemicals and all waste throughout their life cycle in accordance with agreed international frameworks. You know why I find that interesting? It says they significantly reduce their release to air, water, and soil. What did we just go through last year and in the beginning of this year with all of these train derailments and chemical waste spilling all over the air and the soil and the water? And they wanted to achieve this by 2020, and all miraculously by design, of course, but they'll say it's a coincidence that you have all of these chemical waste and train derailments all throughout the country, synchronistically collapsing and going and polluting and contaminating people in the air. It's insane.
Right. Well, chemicals are used a lot to control, like fluoride in the water.
Yeah,
has been shown in a Harvard study to reduce your IQ by 20%. And I've seen a bunch of times where people tried to sue the city to take the fluoride out and win. And then some government agency comes in behind it and says, if you don't put it back in, we're going to pull your funding. So it goes back in. Well, you don't need fluoride for your teeth. That's what we've been told. You have to have fluoride in the water because it's good for your teeth. I mean, how ridiculous is that?
You know where
fluoride is used?
Nervous system.
It's used in chemical weapons. Right. Nerve gas uses fluoride to kill people. Right. Oh my God, we're so domesticated. It's mind-boggling.
Well, 13, climate action. Take action to combat climate change and its impact. Strengthen resilience and adaptive capacity to climate-related hazards and natural disasters in all countries.
Yeah, they get people all wound up that we're the cause of climate change when they have no idea what scalar waves or HARP are. They could twist the weather around like you wouldn't believe. They can create earthquakes. They can create tidal waves like they did at Fukushima. They used it in Vietnam to create the monsoons that pound them with rain. I saw the video of the Prime Minister of Japan, who was approached by the elites. And they threatened him. They said, if you don't do what we're telling you to do with the markets here in Japan, we're going to send a tidal wave on Japan. That's what he said. They were told. He was told. And then he refused. And then the tidal wave came. And that's where Fukushima happened, which I don't even know if Fukushima is real either. Like all the radioactivity going in the ocean. I've seen research to show that whole thing is fake. But they can fake anything, man. They can fake stuff you wouldn't believe how they could convince the whole world that we landed on the moon or that 9/11 or any of these things. 9/11 is ridiculous when you look at it. Yet 20 years later, most people in the US anyway believe it. If you look at international polls, most of the people around the world don't believe it. It's just Americans that are so brainwashed.
That's right. Because they want to be the first to it's that pride, right? We're the first to do this. And there's nothing new under the sun. So ain't nobody the first to do anything, especially nowadays. Number 14 says conserve and sustainably use the ocean, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. Your thoughts?
For them. Yeah, have you ever seen the maps of where what sustainable development means? Is everything gets cordoned off and it's privatized by the government and nobody can go in there. So unless you have an official pass card, you have to travel in these very specific lanes and live in their little cities, and all the other land is cordoned off. And that's what they're talking about there. It's basically creating a slave world.
Yeah, there's people that were going to prove that the earth is flat by traveling to certain distances in the ocean. And there was these guys on this boat and they were going to keep traveling, but there was a naval ship that basically told them to turn back because they block you off from going into these other parts of lands that are basically that they know about, that they're doing things on, but they don't want you to know about it. They want you to think that the earth is only limited to a certain landmass.
Yeah.
Number 15. It says life on land, protect, restore, promote use of terrestrial ecosystems, sustainably manage forests, combat desertification, and halt and reverse land degradation and halt the diversity. Halt biodiversity loss.
Well, that's what I just said. The key term in that line of malarkey was protect. In other words, no trespassing, no entering here unless you're authorized of officialdom. So we'll be ushered in. They're already building 15-minute cities. Like there's one in Arabia, Saudi Arabia, that's like I don't know how long it is. It's like 20 miles long or something. And it's just like, it's called The Line. Look it up. And it's like 20 miles or however long it is, and it's thin. It's like it's not very wide, and that's where. And then you never go anywhere. You live in that one place, and everything you need is there. And there's a tram underneath, and you live in your little cubicle, and it's all, and people will love it. They love their slavery.
Next one on the list is number 16, which is peace, justice, and strong institution. Promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels.
Right. You see the picture of the dove. Remember the Colorado airport. What's that place called? The airport in Colorado.
Yeah, the Denver airport.
Denver airport. There's a mural in there with the guy with the Baryshnikov gun and then the dove, and then there's all these dead bodies down. So they're going to be peace, all right, as long as you toe the line and you're a good slave. If you act up, say anything out of line, you just get killed.
And what's interesting is that the same people who put this initiative and plan together are the same people that are doing this. It says significantly reduce all forms of violence and related death rates everywhere, which they're responsible for most of that. Right. End abuse, exploitation, trafficking of all forms of violence against and torture of children. We all know that they're the main components of that. So it's like I said before, everything they're telling you, this is a blueprint. Like, people, if you want to know what they have in store for us, go to the 17 sustainable developmental goals, and everything that they're saying they're going to do is actually the opposite of what they're really going to do. They're going to do the opposite. You're going to get the reciprocal. Number 17, and last but not least, partnerships for the goals. Strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership of sustainable development. And to me, that's that one world order system that they want. so desperately.
Yeah, they just have us chasing our tails. Like the one that I always get really defensive about is when people wear the pink ribbon and then they want you to donate to cure cancer. And I'm like, what you need to do is take the money that you're spending on the cure for cancer and use it to somehow overthrow the people that are causing you the cancer on purpose by putting 27 ingredients in the McDonald's French fry and putting the fluoride in the water and all of the funky stuff to design to give you cancer. It's not like there's a cure for cancer, but it's not what you think. It's not some chemical or herb, or it's the people that are giving you the cancer. Let's use the money for that,
Right.
Oh my
Well,
gosh.
John, I mean, we're closing in on 2 hours here. And
Yep.
like I said to you before, we can talk for 3, 4, 5 hours here. But
Yep.
we will have you come back. I want to have you come back for a Conspiracies Not a Theory series episode. But I really appreciate the time that you've taken to explain a lot of things. I think you brought a lot of great substance to this episode for people to ponder on and really just make their own decisions, right? Because at the end of the day, the information that's brought out here, we always got to do our own research. We got to listen to the voice within, and we really got to be mindful that everything is based on perception in a world of illusions. And we're going to have to just find out the truth within ourselves in order for us to live that truth and become the change, like Gandhi said, become the change that we want to see in the world. And we have to seek truth in order to do that. So with that being said, any last final comments for this Legacy of Lies series episode?
No, just to stand bold, like you're right and they're wrong. So if you're up against people that are trying to disparage you and try to shame you into silence, just realize, have mercy on them. Like you said before, Jesus said, forgive them for they know not what they do. But don't allow them to steal your destiny, because you are part of an ever-growing mass of people that are like realizing really how crazy this planet is, this place we live. So congratulations. Good job. You're not crazy. You're not stupid. Okay. You're actually smart. You're a conspiracy researcher, not a conspiracy theorist kook nut job. Okay. So good job. Keep going.
Absolutely. So with that being said, John, I want to wish you well. Stick around for just 1 second and I'm going to end this broadcast. All right. So that was John Kirwin. If you haven't been able to get his book, definitely get his book. It's something that I've seen the reviews on that nobody that's gotten that book or that's read that book has been disappointed, especially if you're somebody who wants to get a better understanding of how the veil has been put over our lives or over our eyes for a long period of time. And that book is called the Conspiracy Theorist Survival Guide, a guidebook for persecuted truthers. It'll be in the description box for you to download off of Amazon. And with that being said, brothers and sisters, and when you live in the present, people, there's always an opportunity for a new beginning. So be present and start the new beginning and the change that you want to see in your life. And don't look for the light at the end of the tunnel, because the light is and always will be within you. This is Aura from the Network of Awareness saying peace, love, and light, and may the force of the Most High stay and be with you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Network of Awareness. If you would like to join or find out more about our show, please subscribe and follow us at networkofawareness.com or your favorite podcast listening platforms. If you would like for us to discuss any specific topic you would like to listen to, leave us a message on our website, or you can directly email us at orra@networkofawareness.com. Now, tune in to one of the fastest growing podcast shows on social, spiritual, and self-awareness. With that being said, people, living in the present, being directed by what's given in the hour-long sessions, mind-blowing confessions of improvement that needs checking. Welcoming all ears, tuning out, peace and blessing.